about Mr. Clinton and Mr. George W. Bush today. We're going to end with that. My argument is that the Obama and Trump administrations are too new to have there be any kind of historical assessment. So I will leave that for down the road. If there is someone after me that is crazy enough to do this, and you all are crazy enough to come listen to me, I have to say this is always the highlight of my year, being able to come and talk to you all. And I still can't believe you want to come listen to me. I'm so used to dealing with kids whose parents pay for them to come, and they hate every minute of it. And you all actually seem to enjoy it. We had ended with Mr. Bush 1, George H.W. Bush, last time, and he runs for re-election in 92, but he faces a couple of hills that he can't climb. One is that Reaganomics, if you like, Reagan's supply side economics really wasn't working. We were already building toward a very large deficit. It eventually will work under Mr. Clinton. It doesn't work under Mr. Reagan, and it just gets worse under Mr. Bush. And the second thing that he did was, for some reason, I can't understand why so many Republicans viewed Reagan as the strong, powerful guy, and they viewed Bush as a lightweight. And yet Bush is the one that flew fighter missions in World War II and got shot down. You would think that had he been head of the CIA, had been our ambassador to China. For some reason, though, he just doesn't resonate with the right wing of the Republican Party. And consequently, one of the things he says is, early on in his administration, read my lips, no new taxes. And then it became obvious that he was going to have a tax increase in order to keep everything from going down. And that just offends all the Republicans even worse. And it opens up the option. Now remember, from the time that Mr. Johnson decided he wasn't going to run again in '68, the only Democrat to be elected president was Jimmy Carter, and that was by the barest of bare margins, and he only served one 4-year term. So the Democrats had kind of been on the way out, but they have an unusual appearance when Bill Clinton shows up from Arkansas, a Southern Democrat. He gave a speech in the 88 Democratic Convention, and he went on and on and on and on, and finally the teleprompter said, "Shut up, Bill, get off the stage," and he still didn't stop. And of course everybody is laying into it. Well, unlike some politicians for whom that would have been the kiss of death, Clinton just laughed at himself. He went on the Tonight Show and other national television and joked about the fact that he had run on at the mouth way longer than he should have. He also creates what's called the Democratic Leadership Council. Now, the Democrats had developed, because of Reagan's rhetoric, they had developed a reputation for being anti-business. And what Clinton did was he worked hard to reestablish the business credentials of the Democratic Party, getting ready for his own run for the presidency in '92. The 92 election is one of the most interesting, because you've got a sitting president. You got Mr. Bush running for re-election. You got Mr. Clinton, who is able he got a lot of young people excited, and some Southern Democratic support. But the guy that made it most interesting was Ross Perot. Ross Perot was an independent businessman who got enough support that when they had debates, he's on the debate stage. And I'm not a business person. All you got to do is look at my checkbook to know that I'm not a business person. But he shows up for the debate. He's got all these charts, all of these things that he wants, and it's hard for people to take him seriously. But he gets 20 million votes. No, he doesn't carry any states, but he probably took enough votes away from the more business-oriented Republicans to give Missouri, at least, and maybe a couple of other states, to Mr. Clinton. Clinton supposedly went into his campaign headquarters at the start and wrote on the board, "It's the economy, stupid," and that's what he focused his campaign on. Was the economy is struggling. We need to get the economy back doing what it needs to be doing, and that was enough. That and excitement that there is a Southern Democrat that maybe we can get him back in the White House, and he wins. I think he gets something like 45 or 46% of the popular vote. Mr. Bush is 44 or 45%, and then the rest all go to Mr. Perot. The first, Clinton gets I don't know how you assess whether he was successful or not successful. He shoots himself in the foot early, which doesn't help. He comes down in favor of gays being allowed to participate in the military openly, and that just gets all kinds of complaints. I remember I was at Westfield at the time, and my college counselor was Colonel Rogers. Colonel Rogers was not at all happy with that. He said, it just won't work. It won't work. It's going to be a problem. I said, well, I wasn't in the military. He could beat me in golf, so I didn't argue with him about the military. It was not something that I was good, but eventually what Mr. Clinton did was he came up with the policy of don't ask, don't tell. In other words, just don't make a big deal out of it, and that then if people are gay, they're gay, but if they don't tell you they're gay and you don't ask them if they're gay, then it will not be a problem. I'll let those of you that were in the service decide whether that's true or not. But that wasn't a significantly appreciated decision on the part of the president. The other thing that he does wrong, I guess, right out of the box, is he creates a program or creates a commission to come up with universal health care. And unfortunately, he puts his wife in charge of the commission. Now, probably nobody was more of a lightning rod for criticism than Hillary Rodham Clinton. She may be one of the smartest people ever. Eventually, she gets over the healthcare fanaticism to be elected senator from New York. I think she's the first female senator from New York. In fact, before it's all over with. But instead of using one of his cabinet level positions somebody in health, education, and welfare, whatever it happens to be in charge. He creates this separate unit to come up with a suggestion. Now, again, I'm not saying it was good or bad, but when it was all over with, the document that she presented was over 1,300 pages. Well, nobody and his brother could understand it, and consequently, it is just constantly being criticized by both members of Congress. In fact, it is so unpopular that in the 1994 off-year elections, the Republicans gained control of both houses of Congress. And so any kind of universal health care is dead in the water. And Mr. Clinton has pushed this awfully hard, and it created some problems. One of the things that he does get in his first 2 years that was successful was he got on party lines a deficit reduction bill passed, and the deficit reduction bill was so successful that by 1998 America has gone from huge deficits to actually having a surplus in the budget. It's the last time we ever had a surplus was in the second part, of Mr. Clinton's administration. But what happens, of course, and the other thing we remember from the first 2 years of Mr. Clinton's term is the Oklahoma City bombing. The Oklahoma City bombing was driven. I'm not even sure to this day why, but 186 people lost their lives. Timothy McVeigh had a truck, and he did it with fertilizer, and y'all that are farmers can understand that better than I do. But he parked it outside the Murrah building, and it exploded. He's eventually tracked down. But the devastation, we had had some attempt to blow up a bomb outside of the World Trade Center. It hadn't gotten nearly the impact because it wasn't successful. It didn't get nearly the impact that the bombing of the Murrah building did, and that came. The question is it because people see us as being weak? Is it because people don't like the Democratic administration? But it was a major blow that helped put a negative impact on the first part of Mr. Clinton's years. In 94, the Republicans gained control of the House and Senate, and we get, for the first time now, the contract with America. It was a help me, the Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Thank you. All of a sudden, my 77 years old assaulted my brain. Newt Gingrich's contract with America. That I knew you knew it because we've had that conversation before. What Newt Gingrich wanted was deep cuts, particularly in welfare. They wanted there to be a limit to the number of the amount of time you could claim welfare. If you didn't, after a certain amount of time, you had to get a job. And even when you didn't have a job and were getting welfare, you had to be actively looking for a job. The contract for America, and what Gingrich did may have been great, but he brought a term to American politics that has created headaches ever since, because he said, we're going to do this in 100 days. No. Now, the 100 days came from the New Deal. Now, Roosevelt never talked about 100 days. The press did. But the early New Deal legislation, he calls Congress into special session. They vomit out a huge number of bills to stop the Depression where it is. And somebody just happens to notice that Congress lasted 100 days. Well, when you suddenly make something, you make 100 days the goal, then you lock people in. And Gingrich said, we're going to do this in 100 days. Well, the truth is he couldn't. There was within the Republican Party, there was opposition to some of what he wanted done. They do get the welfare reform bill through. But he also, because of his intransigence, ended up shutting down the government. First time that had happened, 95, late into early 96, before they could get a continuing resolution passed. That's something Americans weren't used to. Now, to me, that creates problems. We're not going to talk about Mr. Trump, but unfortunately, he gets carried into that 100-day mindset, that in 100 days, we're going to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Well, I don't know whether we should or shouldn't repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, but the point is, there were so many things he could have taken on and gotten quick wins because he had a united House and Senate. But if you say, we're going to do this in 100 days, and you don't have in line exactly what you want done, and he didn't, then it ends up coming back to bite him. And that's in essence what Newt Gingrich's contract with America does. It puts into common usage a term that really, you can get a lot of things done as long as you work through them correctly. And so there is this sense that maybe we didn't accomplish everything we could. In the 96 elections, Bob Dole is the nominee for the Republican Party, and he runs against Mr. Clinton. And I kind of remember that as not a very exciting election. Y'all may remember it differently than I do, but Mr. Clinton is. There's already murmuring about Mr. Clinton's extracurricular activities. We'll get there. Hang on. You can't avoid Mr. Clinton. All of that is being muddled under the surface, but it's not enough that it's enough to keep him from being reelected by a much larger margin. Perot runs again, but his support has vanished. He was a one-shot wonder, if you like. But during his term, Mr. Clinton was more successful, possibly in some respects, in foreign policy than he was in domestic policy. In '93, he negotiates the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Now, again, some people love NAFTA, some people don't. But it was an attempt to tear down tariff walls between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. There are an awful lot of people that will argue that a lot of American jobs headed for Mexico, where they would work for less money and still live a good life. And therefore, the Mexican, because their products could come in without having to pay tariffs, it helped them and hurt the American worker. But it's still in effect, I think. We still have NAFTA, and it's still argued about today. He also helped negotiate the creation of the World Trade Organization, created in '94. The World Trade Organization was an attempt to try to organize commerce worldwide, but you may remember the WTO had this major convention in Seattle, and people that didn't like the World Trade Organization showed up in massive numbers to protest. There were riots in the streets and all kinds of other wonderful things. But they do get they do a lot, I guess, to move into a world economy where nations that are less developed industrially can receive more assistance from those that are. And also, the one thing that does happen also during the second part of Mr. Clinton's administration is feminism takes massive steps forward. Suddenly, we're starting to see more and more women running for office. We're seeing more and more women being appointed to important positions. The choice of giving Mrs. Clinton the right to head a major committee may have been a poor decision on her husband's part, but it does become an example for women. We didn't get the Equal Rights Amendment. It still isn't. It hadn't been passed. But at least there are all kinds of wonderful things. It was I think it was during Clinton's years that the National Organization for Women now protested the Masters Golf Tournament. Y'all may remember this. They made a big deal out of telling everybody, do not support anybody that advertises in the Masters Golf Tournament, because the Augusta National does not admit women as members. And so we're going to kick them in the pocketbook. Women just don't go out and do business with those people that advertise. Well, the Masters took care of that. They didn't take any advertising. They got money galore. They had the whole darn tournament with no advertisement at all. And so much for now's attempt to try to bring that to the forefront. Ultimately, the Augusta Nationals did knuckle under, and there are now female members of the Augusta National. But it's that kind of thing. It's kind of a positive belligerence, if you like. When we talked about civil rights several weeks ago, I used the term that Neil and I had picked up at one of the lectures we went to in Atlanta, the term confrontational nonviolence, which is what the speaker we heard that night said made the civil rights movement successful. It wasn't just nonviolent, that was fine, but it was confrontational in its nature, so that there was always somebody in your face arguing for what they thought was correct. Now they're not going to get violent. They're not going to have any kind of upheaval. But you got to know that we want this, and I think that tactic also begins to change the position that women have. I'd like to say that it's changing because mindsets are changing, but I'm not sure the male mindset is ever going to change. Sorry, ladies, that's my concern. But we do start seeing more and more women. The makeup of the House and Senate used to be white-haired old men, and that is slowly changing. Both racially and also in terms of the makeup of the sex of the people that are there. In foreign affairs, Mr. Clinton had a kind of a difficult time because there's a term that you probably have come across called ethnic cleansing. And ethnic cleansing has been a way that people who are in the majority in an area try to get rid of those that are in the minority. And it particularly happened in the Balkan region, and it happened in Africa. There was a move there was an area where there was upheaval in Somalia, and Mr. Clinton, at the encouragement of a number of others, sent American troops in to help try to restore stability to Somalia, and 12 Americans were killed. And because of that, Mr. Clinton was pulled our troops out and didn't send them into Rwanda. And of course, it was in Rwanda that the Tutsis and the Hutus were still battling, I think, today. And the question is, can we eliminate one tribe and make our tribe supreme? And we're not there. And Clinton gets some legitimate criticism. Here we are, the most powerful nation on the face of the earth, and we're not in there helping people. And so when the upheaval came in the Balkans, remember, when World War II ends, when World War I ends, what had been the Austro-Hungarian dual monarchy, which consisted of, it broke up into 5 different nations. It broke up into Czechoslovakia, Austria, Hungary, Yugoslavia. I guess it broke up into 4 Yugoslavia. Some parts also went with Romania. But they were, for a time at least, successful. The problem is Czechoslovakia, you have the Czechs on one side, you got the Slovaks on the other, and they just kind of got together and said, why don't you go your way and we'll go our way. And so the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic, they handled the split without any kind of major crisis. Yugoslavia, there are all kinds of different nationalities. And the division came to Kosovo and to Bosnia and to Serbia, all of these little states. And again, ethnic cleansing becomes, can we get all of your people, particularly if you're Muslims and we're Catholic, or we're whatever it happens to be, we want you gone. And eventually there is a United Nations, a NATO effort to try to bring order out of chaos. And although Mr. Clinton had felt like he had been burned in Africa, nevertheless, he sent American troops in, sent American planes in more than anything. And we're a part, particularly in Serbia. You know, it really distressed me because they'd had the Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, which is the capital of Serbia, at one point in time. And here, Sarajevo was being blasted off the face of the earth. And you think, my, what a change from hosting the Winter Olympics, hosting the world, and fighting now. But eventually, they tracked down the president of Serbia, Milosevic, and he was arrested in 2001. He's not a nice guy. He was actually tried in front of the World Court and convicted and locked up in jail and died in jail in 2006. Clinton gets a pat on the back for America's involvement in the Balkan War. As all of this is going on, there are these scandals that haunt Mr. Clinton. One of them goes all the way back to his days as governor of Arkansas, and it was called Whitewater. And the Whitewater scandal involved a questionable activity on the part of the governor over a question of who could be involved in some land development program. That was bad. What was worse was perhaps the understanding that Mr. Clinton had inappropriate sexual contact with more than one young lady in Arkansas, and he managed to shed that for the most part. But then when he is in the White House, we get the affair of Monica Lewinsky. Monica Lewinsky was an aide in the White House, and supposedly she had inappropriate sexual relations with the President of the United States. And I got to tell you, I'm in Paris with a group of kids, and I don't like elevators. I don't like enclosed spaces. I don't like heights. I would like nothing better than to be able to see all of Paris from the top of the Eiffel Tower, but it ain't never gonna happen. There's no way that I'm gonna get in that elevator and go all the way to the top and then have to wait 15 or 20 minutes to get an elevator to bring me back down. It's just, so we're there one evening, and the kids that wanted to are all going up. Well, there were about 4 or 5 of us. And what we did was walk across the Seine to the Trocadero, which is where if you watch the Olympics, they had that one of the outdoor areas for the opening and closing ceremony. And then we walked up to the Arc de Triomphe and then down the Champs-Élysées just to kill time. And it was a nice evening. And as we're walking down the Champs-Élysées, some lady came up and said, Monica Lewinsky just came out of that hotel and is sitting in that car. So we all went down and looked, and sure enough, in that same purple dress that she always had on. And I wanted to take up a collection to buy her a new dress. Well, of course, what blew my mind was when all of this came to light. Of course, Mr. Clinton said, no, we didn't do this, we didn't do it. Well, Monica Lewinsky still had the gown she had worn, and she had not sent it to the cleaners. And so there was evidence on the gown that he had indeed done exactly what she said he had done. Eventually, of course, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives impeaches him, brings charges against him. I have problems with the use parties are making of impeachment. You know, impeachment's in the Constitution to deal with huge problems. It's not there for one party who happens to be in control of the House of Representatives to impeach the president who happens to be from a different party, particularly knowing they're not going to get a conviction. It's politics. But the problem is the Constitution says you can be impeached for bribery, treason, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Well, that lets the majority party in the House decide what is a high crime and a misdemeanor. You know, the Republicans did it to Clinton, the Democrats did it to Trump. Again, maybe they should have been convicted, maybe they shouldn't. I don't know. But there was nothing, because they're defining high crimes and misdemeanors. In Mr. Clinton's case, it's because he lied to people over his extramarital affairs. My last boss at Montgomery Bell Academy, I was there 23 years, and the last boss I had, a guy by the name of Doug Pascal, had graduated from the University of the South, was a Rhodes Scholar from Sewanee, and just happened to be Bill Clinton's roommate. Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar, so you know they'd known each other. Well, I left to go to Westfield and Perry, And that next November, Doug was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And the hope was that he would live through the year. In fact, he did. He lived about another year before he died. But one of the things that I thought was class was Bill Clinton found out about this and invited Doug and Rosie to come and spend the weekend in the White House with him. Now, I'm not justifying anything else that Mr. Clinton did in terms of his morals, but I thought that was pretty special. That even after all this time, he would find out that his graduate school roommate was dying of pancreatic cancer, and inviting him and his wife to come to the White House. But you know, the good thing. The 90s in independent schools were really good years. I got to tell you that. There seemed to be a lot of people that wanted to come to Westfield. You know, there were less than 300 when I walked in the front door, and 9 years later we had 570 kids. We raised money for 4 new buildings. It was financial times, because you can tell financial times good and bad in the independent school world as you can in any other business. But Mr. Clinton, whatever he did right and wrong, at least the times were positive in terms of the way the economy. Now, the economy manages to bounce back much better than it did under either Mr. Reagan or Mr. Bush, and you can say that as my buddies in the AP reading used to say, Clinton made Reaganomics work, and that's the reason that it just didn't have time under Reagan to work the way he wanted it to. The 2000 election, 2000, is that where we are?
Yeah.
Ooh. The 2000 election, the Democrats nominated Al Gore. Al Gore had been vice president for 8 years. He was senator from Tennessee when I was there. His daddy had been senator from Tennessee when I first went to Nashville. He was I guess easily the choice. The Republicans, it was a little bit more of a campaign, but ultimately George W. Bush, the son of George H.W. Bush, gets the Republican nomination. And Sandy, my daughter, will tell you that she went to the courthouse in Austin with Marie, and the night that he claimed that he was the nominee.
No nominee. That's what.
Oh, that was when.
Declared that he was president.
Okay.
That was after all the
That's after the
passes.
Supreme Court. And again, y'all remember the 2000 election, the hanging chads, where in Florida you push things through and they didn't quite fall off. And it was the first time that an election for the presidency was determined by the Supreme Court. And they finally it went. They said no more recounts, go with the numbers you got, and that gave Florida to Mr. Bush, and he's elected president. And to his credit, Al Gore there was no January the 6th, there was no riot, there was no storm the Capitol. He called Mr. Bush up and congratulated him. And the issue was over with. Mr. Bush's vice president was Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney was then. I saw he'd come out and supported the Democrat for president this time, but he was a hard-nosed conservative Republican. He was kind of a lightning rod. One of the things he wanted was to increase or decrease our need to be dependent upon oil reserves out of the Middle East. And that meant he wanted to develop more American oil reserves. Well, the oil reserves he wanted to develop were on that along the coast of Alaska, in area that if mistakes happened, it could do all kind of ecological damage. But Mr. Cheney didn't care. That was something that he pushed hard and ultimately got his way. Early on, Mr. Bush also was a part of the group that signed the Kyoto Treaty, and the Kyoto Treaty was an attempt to limit greenhouse gases exposure or emissions into the air. But again, obviously, what we remember about Mr. Bush was 9/11. He's inaugurated in January, and before even a year's over with, the World Trade Center is assaulted by Al Qaeda, and it turns out Al Qaeda's headquarters, Al Qaeda just kind of as so many terrorist groups are today. They're all over the place and they move from place to place. But the word was that Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan, and Mr. Bush then immediately demands that the Taliban, the people that were in charge of the government of Afghanistan, surrender Osama bin Laden to him, and they refused to do it. And so there begins then, if you like, the second Gulf War. It begins in Afghanistan first. First Gulf War, remember, was his daddy's attempt to get the people of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, get them out of Kuwait. And he put together this fabulous alliance. He had just about everybody and anybody on our side. He got the Russians to stay home. He got the Israelis to say, look, they're going to try to bomb you. Please don't respond. We'll do what we can. And the Israelis agreed. But he even had all the Muslim countries on our side. And the first Gulf War was remarkably successful. What he did, though, was he set the goals very carefully. The goal was to get Iraq out of Kuwait. It wasn't to overturn the Iraqi government. I think Mr. Bush Sr. was smart enough to understand that these people are going to be fighting regardless of what we do. And so once they had achieved the goal of driving the Iraqi armies back into their own territory, everybody went home. It meant that Saddam Hussein was still in charge of Iraq, and still could create all kinds of problems. Well, of course, now Mr. Bush the second doesn't worry about putting together any kind of alliance. He does get support from England. He gets some support from others, but he just sends American troops in. Their job is to find Osama bin Laden. They eventually do, but not in the short term. They do overthrow the Taliban, and they do create a new Afghanistan government. Now, remember, at some point in time, the Russians had invaded Afghanistan, and we had given the Taliban, among others, all kinds of military support. But there's an old saying: "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." And so at that point in time, they were our friends, and we helped them out. Well, the Russians, it's kind of like watching Russia with the Ukraine. You got this big, powerful Russia and this little Afghanistan, but the Russians never could win. And you'd think that big, powerful America would recognize that may happen to us too. But we intervene anyway. We're there a long time. My son-in-law, who was in Desert Storm originally in '92, was in Afghanistan twice and in Iraq once. In the second Gulf War, he got a Purple Heart when the truck he was riding in ran over an IED and it exploded. And he went one way and the driver went the other way. And he said he remembered what one of his teachers at Lamar County Elementary School had taught him, that you stop, drop, and roll. And he said that was where he learned it, and that was what he did. And he came out okay from that. Eventually, a couple of things happened as a result of the attack on the World Trade Center. One is the passage of the U.S. Patriot Act, and that's not really the name of it, but the name of it, it goes on forever. But the U.S. Patriot Act gives the government all kinds of flexibility in terms of dealing with terrorist organizations. You don't get just free reign. One of the things that when we finally do invade Iraq, there's a prison established there, the Abu Ghraib prison, and that got a lot of bad publicity because some of our soldiers took great glee, understandably, but took great glee at trying to humiliate some of their Iraqi prisoners in any way they could. But the argument was, and the other thing that comes is the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. So next time you stand in line for 45 minutes trying to get through the airport, there it is. It all came. I was somewhat appalled a year ago when I flew to eastern North Carolina to go on a trip with my younger daughter, and at the time I was still using the rollator, and nice young lady from Delta put me in a wheelchair and wheeled me through the terminal, and my granddaughter was with me, and she's got the rollator with her, and I get up to the place, and the guy said, "Take off your shoes." I said, "Huh?" Take off your shoes. Well, I took off my shoes and my braces that I always wore when I was up. And he said, "Now you have to walk through this machine by yourself. Can you do that?" I said, "Well, I think I can." I couldn't now. I mean, no way. But I said, "I think I can." He said, "Now you can't touch anything." I said, "Oh, great. I'm all for Homeland Security, but do I look like I'm going to blow something up? I mean, it cut me some slack somewhere." But I haven't flown again, and probably never will again. I think I've done all it. Somebody's
Watch is beeping.
Somebody's watch is beeping. Well, okay, it died.
It is prone to.
Well, my machine is too, but usually it only goes 3 times and then quits. At any rate, January of 2002, the war widens from Afghanistan. It widens to Iraq also. And the justification is that at the end of the first Gulf War, there was rumors that the Iraqis were developing nuclear weapons. And in fact, the UN was empowered to go in and check for weapons of mass destruction. And the Iraqis had basically refused to allow them in. And so the justification for expanding the war, in part, was this sense that there was we want to find these weapons of mass destruction. we want to capture Saddam Hussein. And again, without a lot of support, America goes into the war, the second war in Iraq. It's called Iraqi Freedom, the second one. Now, again, the people who probably know more about what's going on in the Middle East than anybody else are the Israelis. And they told us there's no weapons of mass destruction. You're not going to find any. But we went in anyway, and sure enough, we never found any weapons of mass destruction. It could have been all kinds of excuses. But we are now in Afghanistan, or in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and we stay there a long time. Remember, we don't bring our forces home from Afghanistan until Mr. Biden is in office. It becomes a long, frustrating war. The other things that happened, Mr. Bush is reelected in 2004. The two things that are most remembered from his second term, one is Katrina. Katrina slams into the Gulf, and the devastation is truly remarkable. Mr. Bush gets a lot of unfair criticism, in my opinion, because he doesn't send in the troops to do anything about it. But the Constitution says that the governor has to ask for help. And no, the governor was late asking Mr. Bush for help. Now, maybe he should have gone on anyway and said, I don't care, we're going to go down and do what we think's right. But he didn't. And consequently, there was a lot of concern. Sandy's family, or Jay's family, is from New Orleans, and so she's down there several times a year. And I guess it's safe to say that there are still areas that have not recovered completely.
Partly, my in-laws lost their house.
Yeah.
Among other things. It was difficult. The other thing that happens during the second part of Mr. Bush's term in office is we suffer an economic collapse. All the good things that had happened with Mr. Clinton went by the board. We had deficits of $400 billion a year, whereas we had surpluses under Mr. Clinton. We're still trying to fight our way out from under those kinds of economic problems. Our deficit just seems to grow with every year. And again, I'm not an economic expert. I don't understand all of this stuff, but I'm distressed by what I'm going to leave my granddaughters long after I'm gone, that they're going to be dealing with the issue. In 2008, the Democrats make their comeback with Mr. Obama, and it becomes the first African American, I guess you don't really use that term anymore, the first black man to be elected president of the United States. And we'll leave it here rather than going further. Any questions or comments? Critiques? Yes.
Do you think that Bush went into Iraq because he felt that his daddy should have gone in and taken out Saddam Hussein, and that by God, he was going to do it? Or do you think maybe Cheney was whispering in his ear that there was also rumors that Cheney wanted the oil, things like that? I mean, do you have any thoughts about?
I have. I know that Mr. Bush made an unfortunate comment when he said he tried to kill my daddy. Because that was something that Osama bin Laden was supposed to have said. Well, if you're president of the United States, you don't judge national politics on the basis of family affairs, in my opinion. So, but I think that he felt like he made a big deal when they had the Olympics in 2004, that there was an Iraqi soccer team, and he was very proud of the fact that they'd had free elections, and he had thought that we had created enough stability that they could get into normal activities. But it was interesting that they interviewed the members of the Iraqi soccer team, and they had nothing good to say about the United States. Yeah, we're here, we're playing soccer, and then because of those people. So the problem if you get involved in places, in my opinion, where they've been fighting forever, and that's what his daddy had said. We could have gone on in '92 and we could have eliminated Saddam Hussein, but we had nothing positive to put in place of it. And I think Mr. George W. Bush thought they did have something positive to put in place, and they did have free elections, but it doesn't seem to have created what I think he thought we might be able to do. Folks, I thank y'all for coming to listen.